Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Visions of Taiwan. And today we have the honor to invite Taipei City Councilor Vincent Zhao to your radio to talk about SDG 8 and 12 in Taipei's urban development and also international relations. So before we started, Councilor, can you give us a brief introduction of yourself?
Sure. Thank you for having me here. It's a great honor to be here. My name is Vincent Zhao. I represent much of southern Taipei, which is Da'an and Wenshan districts, which is actually also our most populous district. My work in City Council has really focused on the issue of transportation. And as you know, transportation has a huge relationship with this idea of SDGs. So I do look forward to sharing my thoughts and perspectives on both transportation and SDGs in the time going forward.
So first we're going to talk about background. So you have had extensive experience working in various positions in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including the Director of the Minister Office and also in National Security Council. So how has your background in international affairs influenced your current approach to local governments in Taipei?
Well, it's really twofold. So first of all, diplomacy is actually much like politics and vice versa. I mean, it's the art of dealing with people, it's the art of communications, it's the art of finding consensus. And I think whether we're talking about diplomacy, which entails country-to-country negotiations and ways of finding common interests and shared values, or we're talking about local politics, which really is about setting aside differences, finding similarities, and ultimately finding ways of moving forward together. You do see a lot of similarities there. So I'm very glad that my past experiences have carried forward into this new field that I work in. But aside from that, I do think that having an international perspective is very, very important, including talking about politics at a local level. So a lot of the issues that we deal with in Taipei, high housing prices, the lack of traffic safety, the need for better urban planning, I mean, there's numerous examples we should be looking at around the world. We should be looking at best practices. We should be looking at how global cities deal with these recurring challenges. And so I do think that having this past experience and having lived in different countries and cities around the world has given me a better perspective to understand how we can move forward in terms of dealing with Taipei's current challenges.
Okay, so I do think it's really important to recognize that Taipei, which is a pretty big city in Taiwan, is deeply connected to international trends and challenges and opportunity, right?
Absolutely. I mean, Taipei is Taiwan's most globally facing city. I think there's a lot we can do, to be honest. We face a lot of challenges at a national level when it comes to diplomacy, international space, international organizations, and even diplomatic allies. And so I do think that there's a lot of room for municipal diplomacy to grow. I mean, there's less of a political resistance we see coming, but I think aside from that, it's just really underexplored. So I do look forward to exploring how Taipei can connect better with global cities around the world.
Right. So given your expertise in foreign affairs, have you found any opportunities to connect Taipei's international new perspective with local policy, especially in areas like businesses or trading?
So like I said, one of the big focuses and priorities I have in Taipei City Council is this idea of having better streets, safer streets, more pedestrian-oriented transit development. And there are a lot of examples that we're looking at learning from around the world. So one of the big things that we had worked on and passed earlier this year was the formulation of Taipei's first ever road design manual. That's never taken place in the past. I mean, our roads are designed somewhat haphazardly. You know, sidewalks, yes or no, it's all a matter of debate. But what we do want to do is learn from other global cities that do have a set road design manual, whereas roads are based on, you know, traffic capacity, are based on traffic objectives, are based on their purpose. And so we've had that passed, and that took a lot of inspiration, for example, from what San Francisco did about a decade ago, what New York has been doing, what Tokyo has been doing. And so we took the best of what we believe global cities were doing in terms of road designs, and we imported that into Taipei, and we consolidated that and passed a new road design manual, which is legally binding, and we should see the effects of for years to come.
Isn't that really similar to your proposed policy, Vision Zero?
Absolutely. I mean, so Vision Zero entails a number of aspects. So the 3 E's of road safety are engineering, education, and enforcement. And so we're really focused on the engineering component right now because our roads are under-engineered. They need to be better planned. They need to be more purposeful. They need to better reflect, I think, the transportation we want to see. So first is working on the engineering component, but second, we're working on education as well. I'm sure that people understand the actions that everybody, all road users must take to ensure safety for all. And then number three is enforcement. So everything's tied together. And there are, again, a lot of examples that we're looking at around the world in terms of how to better shape our traffic for years to come.
We have talked about a lot of your work, no matter if it's current or previously. So as you transition from national and international role to managing urban affairs, particularly in Taipei, what challenges and opportunity have you encountered in applying your previous diplomatic and governmental experience to local governments?
So I guess one of the challenges I've had personally would be people asking, why'd you come? Why are you a local politician? And for me, it's a really straightforward answer because this is what I've been passionate about. This is what brought me into politics. This is what I want to do. But I guess I do face that disconnect from some people that say, there's a huge difference between talking about international negotiations on trade, on security, and then focusing on streets and road safety. But for me, it's been a natural progression, and I think this is something I feel very I'm very passionate about, and certainly something I feel very deeply about. So that is an impression I need to continue to work on correcting. Yeah.
And also transitioning from really broad international and also national policy to addressing hyper-local issue can be hard sometimes, right?
Well, yes and no, in the sense that absolutely communication is tough. Yeah. Whether you're talking about international negotiations or even just convincing local constituents about the need for reform, and particularly reform that could entail months of disruption like a road redesign would.
Yeah, I do think local people, they will expect really quick answer from politicians.
I think people want to have the good without the bad, and I think that's a natural
exactly.
tendency. So you want to see better roads, but you don't want to go through the construction phase. You want to see a more pedestrianized area, but you also want to have parking. So there's always pros and cons, gives and takes, and our job is to try to, maybe not find a solution that's 100%, but find a solution that's 80% for all and satisfies all different parties.
So how has your international negotiation experience helped you resolve conflicts or also build consensus in Taipei?
So one thing I've learned in diplomacy is probably the most important thing is the importance of just making friends. And I think that's carried over well. In diplomacy, I think people find it very hard to conduct diplomacy if the first thing you do when you sit down is be hard-hitting and you charge and you say, this is what we want, A, B, C, D, E. And that normally doesn't lead to very good results. But I think it's much better to be able to sit down, to form a connection first, to understand who you're dealing with and who you're talking with, and to find similarities and commonalities, and then to move on from there. And I think that's important at a local level as well. I think what people don't want to see at a local level is you coming down and saying, hey, we have to do this. I don't think that's a good approach. I think the best approach is these are some of the objectives we hope to achieve, and we want to listen to you in terms of how you think we can work together to achieve those objectives. And I think people will be much more receptive to that sort of messaging.
Okay, so how do you see your previous diplomatic role, especially in the chief of the political section in Washington, D.C., contributing to strengthening Taipei's international relations? And how do you plan to continue these efforts in your current role?
So I think what I bring to Taipei City Council has been a prioritization and an urgency in terms of how Taipei must do much more in terms of our international partnerships. And I'm very glad that I've found a willing partner, somewhat of a willing partner in the city government itself. So the city government has agreed to a proposal that I made last year, which is that we must establish a top-level agency that deals with international partnerships. And the Taipei City Council has agreed to that. So we hope that this year we'll make tangible progress to establishing this kind of top-level, first-level agency that will be responsible for expanding Taipei's international partnerships.
And I do think the experience in DC can help you build more international relationship and understand how foreign policy work, and most importantly, networking.
Well, absolutely. For most of Taiwan's municipalities, and Taipei is no exception, a lot of our municipal diplomacy centers on the United States. And what I found in DC is that in the past, yes, the limitations were smaller, but a lot of limitations still existed because, in a sense, China was doing the same. And China, as some of the preconditions that they had when they engaged with cities across the US was that, hey, you can do something with us, but then you can't do anything with Taiwan. But in recent years, that trend has shifted. And I think a lot of cities and states around the US are now somewhat critical of the relationship with Chinese institutions, such as the Confucius Institute, but also with their municipal and provincial governments. And as a result, they're turning back to Taiwan. So there's a lot of, I think, untapped potential there. I mean, the US is a very big place. There's 50 states, numerous cities. And so I think our job here in Taiwan is to really tap that potential and to find ways of cooperating at a city-to-state level and a city-to-city level, and find ways of furthering our cultural, educational, arts and other areas, I think, of mutual interest.
So what we previously have discussed about is really ties deeply into SDG 8, which is decent work and economic growth, and also SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. So one of your policy is focused on enhancing administrative efficiency. So how do you plan on aligning this goal with SDG 8 by promoting decent work and economic growth in Taipei?
So there's a lot of big components to SDGs, and its SDGs are very top level, I think, objective that we must look carefully at. But I think if you look at sort of the essence of SDGs, which is sustainable development, I mean, it entails decent working conditions, entails good environmental conditions, it entails ways, I think, where countries can reduce their environmental footprint. And I think that's the path that we're committed to pursuing. So I talked about transportation. I mean, that's one way that we're trying to reduce, I think, emissions through private vehicles and try to create more pedestrian, public transit-oriented development. Other ways you talked about, how do we do so sort of at a business-to-business level? So one of the organizations that I've cooperated with for a long time is the Circular Economy Association in Taiwan. And we've had numerous workshops here in Taipei focusing on how we can encourage, through policy level, how we can encourage companies and organizations across Taipei to think about net zero through the lens of circular economy. So reduce waste, to ensure that components can be recyclable and reused, to basically change this idea of ownership into more of an idea of constant renewal. And so these are some of the actions that we continue to take. And these are some of the, I think, good recommendations that we've received so far that could translate at a policy level.
Aside the workshop, are there any specific program aimed at reducing unemployment and improving job opportunity for the city's residents?
So again, I think it's a very broad-based goal. If we're talking about innovation, entrepreneurship, reducing unemployment, I think there are specific programs that we're engaged very, very closely at. Some of them, for example, on how we can encourage youth innovation here in Taipei. And I think, to be fair, that is an area of focus, because when we talk about unemployment, obviously this happens with all different fields, all different industries, all different ages, but primarily it's amongst young people. So we have a fairly high unemployment rate amongst people that have just come out of college, universities. We must find ways of reducing that. And one of the things that we've been working on with the city government is really how can we create the right conditions so that we can nurture startups, so that we can encourage entrepreneurship, so we can encourage young people to pursue essentially new ways of doing things. And so that, I think, is a process that's undergoing, whether we're talking about increasing grants, whether we're talking about building sort of the right co-working spaces, networking spaces that lower the conditions that are required to start a business. I think all of that is ongoing.
When we talk about economic in Taiwan, SME is a really important part of it. So how do you plan to support the growth of small and medium enterprises in Taipei while promoting fair and sustainable business practices that fit into the principle of SDG 8?
So two components to that. The first component is what are we doing to expand SMEs? And I think a lot of that is actually global. So, I mean, if we look at SMEs across Taipei, it's clear that a lot of these SMEs are engaged in exports. A lot of these SMEs are engaged in global business. And so, I think from our perspective, I mean, the government is in no way, shape, or form able to say to companies, you can and cannot do business here you should do business there. I think our job is to create the right incentives for this to take place. And so throughout my past work as a diplomat in DC, I was very proud to be part of the team that had negotiated and discussed this economic prosperity partnership dialogue with the first Trump administration, which later grew into what we saw as the 21st Century Trade Agreement. Now, obviously, it was a bit different, particularly given us different administrations, but the aim was similar, which is to encourage trade investment between Taiwan and the US. And by part, that would obviously benefit businesses here in Taipei as well. And in terms of how we can think about, for example, SDGs in that context, it's important to look at international standards and international trading practices. So many of the discussions that we have when we talk about trade engagements with the United States or other partners around the world is countries increasingly demand a set tier of environmental and labor standards before any concrete action can take place. So for example, within both EPPD as well as the 21st Century Trade Initiative with the United States, a large part was actually centered on having similar kind of labor environmental standards that would in a sense, I think, fulfill some of the objectives laid out by SDGs. So I think it's important for us to look at international trends and where other countries hope to achieve with Taiwan as we think about how to revise those standards here.
We have talked about road safety in our previous discussion, and road safety is one of the most important proposal in the website on the City Council that you proposed. So how do you see improving road safety, particularly through the implementation of Vision Zero initiative, as contributing to economic productivity in Taipei? And does reducing accidents and fatalities relate to your goals for sustainable economic growth under SDG 8?
So the short answer is absolutely. The long answer is a bit complicated. So we have to first look at the root causes of the problems we face in Taipei. And the problems, to be clear, are manifold. We have about 5 times the road fatality per capita compared to many other global cities around the world. For example, Japan, Tokyo, being about 1/6 of Taiwan's traffic fatalities per capita. London being about 1/5. So the entire metropolitan London has about 5 times Taipei's population, but the same amount of traffic fatalities. So it's clear there is much we need to do to reduce that number. And ways of reducing that number, I think, I've made clear, are centered on engineering, education, enforcement. But for me personally, I think there's almost a cultural identity that we must look at, which is how we can find a way of building a citywide transportation network that alleviates rather than increases tensions between different users of the road. So what we see in Taiwan right now is that when you drive a car, you hate motorists, you hate pedestrians. When you're a pedestrian, you think everybody's encroaching on your kind of space. When you're a motorist, you think cars are dangerous, and certainly you're, as a result, vulnerable. And so there's a lot of tension on the road today, and a lot of that just because we just don't have good road design. So for example, concretely, when we talk about intersections, for example, Taipei has these huge intersections. If you've ever been to, for example, parts of Rengai Road, we have intersections that are 60, 70 meters long, just huge crosswalks. So what are some things we should think about? We think about at intersections, pushing out the sidewalk at intersections to reduce that length. You think about barriers sort of in the middle so that pedestrians can stop and take stock of their surroundings. You think about better signage, better lighting. You think about better education. So there's a lot that we need to do sort of in all corners of Taipei. And the key part of that is to reduce that tension between these different road user groups and find ways of everybody coming together. So that's the first, I think, cultural shift that we're really thinking about. And the second one is really respect for life. Many times what we see is that people are in a hurry. It's a big city. Everybody's in a hurry to get somewhere. And sometimes being in a hurry, the traditional view takes a priority over being safe. And so sometimes that must change. And, we're looking at, for example, in individual neighborhoods, slowing down traffic speeds, having traffic bumps, better visibility. In certain areas, we're making pedestrian priority zones. So these are streets where you should not honk. You should not ask pedestrians to get out of the way. You have to respect their space on the road. And so in my district itself, we've made progress on 4 or 5 of these different areas where we're pushing on pedestrian first prioritization. So all of that, I think, entails a bit of a cultural shift. And all of that, I think, would relate to what you're thinking about on SDGs, which is the respect for life and so forth.
So just out of curiosity, does this Vision Zero project have involved like engineers or data analysis or even public safety officers? Or is it just all you and your office doing all the work?
Oh, no. I mean, it's certainly a team effort. I am very pleased that Taipei City government has taken this seriously. The Department of Transportation has an amazing Director General, Shen Minghong, who we cooperate with very, very closely. And I think he's very like-minded and very mission-driven as well. Behind everything we do, we're looking at a wealth of international resources, examples, best practices, things that have worked, things that haven't worked. And we're trying to take the best of what we see there and bring it to Taipei. Now, progress is going to be haphazard. Progress isn't going to be smooth. I mean, that's the case with any democracy, but progress has to be made. And we're continuing to make that progress day by day.
So, in your work promoting Taipei as a hub for international business, how are you encouraging responsible consumption and production among foreign enterprises, especially regarding waste reduction and also resource efficiency?
So like I said, I mean, we're very engaged with this group that works on circular economy, 循环经济. And they're very, very good. They're led by a number of people that have worked extensively in the corporate sphere, that engage with international businesses and understand sort of what businesses can and cannot do. A lot of it is, number one, having the right incentives in place so that companies really think about net zero as a core objective of how to best achieve their business interest here in Taiwan. So you need the right incentives in place. Number two, you have the right ecosystem in place as well. So when we talk about net zero, for example, are there the right industries can engage in recycling effectively? Are there the right industries that can turn recyclable goods back into manufactured goods? Are there the right industries that can sort of help companies shape their best practices in this field? So number two is finding the ecosystem and building that ecosystem there. And a lot of that has to do with the first part, which is the right policies. But then number three, you have to really think about talent as well and getting the right people that are engaged in this. So, I mean, there are a lot of steps should continue to be taken here in Taiwan, but I think what I think is most of all and most important of all is awareness. And this is what this association has been doing. They've been sitting down with businesses, they've been taking stock of where they're at and sharing with them best practices on how to engage in circular economy. So that's, I think, critical of our job, which is to work with them to promote this idea of SDGs and sustainable and circular economy here in Taiwan.
So one thing that I noticed is that you put a lot of effort into making Taipei a more international city. Like I've seen the video of you questioning the mayor about how he didn't have
go to France.
have enough partnership with different organizations.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I feel that the mayor we currently have, there's a lot of potential here. I mean,
exactly.
He speaks English obviously fluently. He's worked in a major law firm in the United States. I think he's well aware of sort of Taiwan's challenges and the opportunities in international space. So I hope that what we've tried to do is build a constructive environment where the council and individual councilors can work together with city government to make progress on specific objectives. And I think we have. So again, I've said that we are making progress on establishing a kind of a first level department dealing with international affairs. The mayor has given me his word that he will do so. And I expect that once we do so, Taipei's ability to forge greater international partnerships will increase dramatically.
So as we approach the final part of our conversation, is there anything you'd like to share with the audience?
Well, I think a couple things. The first one, and I say this to young people, I think I'm still quasi-young, but the first point is that really everybody, it's worth being involved in public policy issues. And you shouldn't feel that it's kind of irrelevant. You shouldn't feel that it's very far from you and far from your everyday life. It's unfortunate or not, politics impacts everything that we do, everything Taiwan does kind of internationally. And so I do think that there's a lot of space for young people to be further involved in the public policy sphere and for people to make contributions. That's number one. Number two is that Taiwan's diplomatic space is very, very limited. We face a lot of challenges. And I think a lot of young people can think about how they can also contribute to building more robust international presence for Taiwan that's outside sort of foreign policy, trade, and sort of hard areas. In my diplomatic careers, for example, I've seen young people from Taiwan go to many underdeveloped countries around the world to work with farmers to build sustainable coffee farms, to market those coffee beans around the world. I've seen people contribute to raising awareness on women's issues in Southeast Asia. I mean, there are a lot of areas where people can contribute. A lot of those areas are going to take place outside government. So the last part I want to say is that as we think about a better city, a more green city, a more sustainable city, a lot of these initiatives are also very, very local based. I've been, for example, very, very humbled to see just young people from universities across Taiwan engage in workshops, engage in seminars, engage in discussions on how to better design roads, for example. Even in the Taiwan National Taiwan University, I've participated in road design workshops, spearheaded by young people that aren't traffic professionals, but are willing to learn and contribute. So I think really the sky's the limit, and there is definitely room and space for everybody's passion to come through and to contribute to public issues. So I encourage people to do so.
Okay, thank you, Councillor, for
Thank
sharing
you.
your perspective with us today. And I do think your perspective on Taipei's growth and sustainability is not only important to my project, but also for the entire city. And I really look forward to seeing how these initiatives shape the future of Taipei and also contribute to global sustainability.
Thank you so much, Zoe. Thank you.